We're very pleased to welcome you to this book launch event in honor of Dr. Naomi Feuchtwanger-Sarig's new publication, Thy Father's Instruction, Reading the Nuremberg Miscellany as Jewish Cultural History. Professor Roni Stauber, the director of the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center, sends his very deep apologies. He's currently abroad and in a spot where he doesn't have enough reception, so he pre-recorded a message that I will shortly play for you. And we'd just like to thank you all for joining us for this very exciting culmination to a very long and rich project. So thank you. And
good evening. First, allow me to apologize for not being with you at this happy event launching Naomi's significant publication, Thy Father's Instruction. I want to thank my colleagues Adi and Sarah for organizing the symposium, and it gives me a great pleasure to congratulate Naomi on her achievement. It is also a moment of pride for our center to be part of this momentous achievement. Exhibiting the iconography of the Nuremberg Miscellany, Naomi allows a reconstruction of Jewish daily life in Ashkenaz in the early modern period and provides an insight into the material culture of an affluent German Jewish family from which only a scant remnants are left. Naomi's book is an essential contribution to the mission of our center, exploring various aspects of Jewish life in the diaspora. We intend to continue this significant field, encouraging and initiating studies on multiple parts of Jewish art to provide insight into Jewish thoughts, religious devotion, daily life, and relations with the surrounding Christian society. So again, congratulations to you, Naomi, and I wish you all the participants a fruitful conference.
okay. We're very pleased to welcome Dr. Johannes Pommeranz, the director of the library at the German National Museum in Nuremberg, from which the manuscript that Naomi based her very visual book on is from their collection. And I'm happy to welcome you, Dr. Pommeranz, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear Dr. Feuchtwanger-Sarig, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin my greeting with a quote. Our protagonist of this evening, Dr. Sarig, once wrote to my colleague Eberhard Slenska as follows. I have some very good news to share with you. As you will see from the signature of this mail, I am now holding a new position at the Tel Aviv University. She had gratefully accepted the job offer from the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center. And she wrote further, my main occupation there is getting the manuscript of our 1758, the Nuremberg Miscellany, ready for publication within a year. This is really coming through. End of quote. This email is dated 29th July 2007. Well, sometimes books just need their time. But it was worth the wait. And one can only warmly congratulate Dr. Sarig on her monographic study of the fascinating Nuremberg Miscellany she has presented in this year. In this study, the reader will experience what the Nuremberg Miscellany are, a masterpiece of Jewish visual culture which can easily be completely overlooked. Rather a duck than a swan, with an unconspicuous brown marbled hardcover in handy octavo format that protects the inner body of the book. Not suitable for representation, but for internalization. But it's not only the highly interesting manuscript of cultural history that inspires. The study of it fascinates in equal measure. One senses at every step that the work has matured over the years, that her research on the work has become of her life. Therefore, Dr. Sarig's studies about the Nuremberg Miscellany represents a milestone regarding the research of Jewish visual culture, and they are a life's work at the same time. And I'm grateful to her for another reason as well. As you may know, our library, you see in the background, founded mid-19th century, is an essential in-house resource for academics researching art, art history, popular culture, and regional and local history in German-speaking areas. Although the present-day holdings consist mainly of modern material, our library contains a large stock of about 100,000 items of rare, mainly German books. But this historic collection also contains a few works written in languages we are not at home in. For example, Nuremberg Miscellany, I have always believed that the manuscript is a prayer book, and I'm not alone in this. Bernhard Purin from the Jüdisches Museum Munich is currently working on a catalogue of the Judaica holdings in our museum. About 70 works from the Judaica collection, from the departments of musical instruments and textiles, from the decorative arts and sculpture collections are intended for scientific processing, and of course with a special focus on provenance history. But our Hebrew manuscripts are excluded from the study. Therefore, I'm all the more grateful to Dr. Sarig for her enlightening book. If we can't do the work ourselves, we are all the more grateful for external help. Also, we now understand the Nuremberg Miscellany much better, thanks to the studies. Some questions remain unanswered. For example, we can't limit the acquisition to the years 1857, 1858, but we now know nothing about the seller because the corresponding inventory volume is considered lost. Well, speakers follow me today will go more into detail to shed more light on unanswered questions. But I would not like to close without pointing out that we now have published the Nuremberg Miscellany manuscript under the public domain mark 1.0 license in our digital library. I've written you the address in the chat. And you are invited to have a look at it, so you can also easily form your own picture of the book that seemed so enchanting and decidedly mysterious to us for many, many decades. Dr. Sarig needed light in this darkness and deserves our warmest thanks for the knowledge she has gained. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Those kind words.
Thank you, Dr. Pommeranz. You did not believe, and I did not believe that this book will come to fruition. I know, but it's here, and I will be happy to come again to visit you in Nuremberg and see the other manuscripts that I've seen in the past as well. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll come.
Now happy to invite Alice Meroz, the acquisitions director for the De Gruyter Rethinking Diaspora Series, ours, as well as the extended Jewish Studies and New Testament collection.
Hello and good evening and Erev Tov and guten Abend. First of all, thank you for the invitation to say a few words here, because after all, this is not very common for those like me who work behind the scenes at the publishing house. And if we are on the subject of thanks, I have a few more people I have to say thank you to. First of all, thank you to Naomi Feuchtwanger-Sarig for all the work and dedication she put into this project, for the detailed preparations and the critical eye in the typesetting process, and for her always palpable warmth and cordiality. Thanks also to the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center in Tel Aviv for their support through the entire process of the publication, especially to Adi Moskowitz and to Sarah Appel, because they quickly and reliably clarified countless detailed questions and helped countless times when I, as the product manager of the publication process, felt that I was not really caught in a dead end. Thank you so much. And thank you to Johannes Pommeranz and to the Germanisches Nationalmuseum in Nuremberg for allowing the Nuremberg Miscellany to be published and researched so intensively, and for the open access or the publication on the website now. In German, they say, was lange wird, wird endlich gut. And we return to the opening remarks of Mr. Pommeranz. When I joined the editorial team at the Gruyter in 2018, I was told that there was a manuscript we were waiting for since 2014, and it was Naomi's manuscript. And people really were eagerly waiting for it. And whenever I traveled to a conference to Israel or the US, I was also asked when the book will come out. And then finally in 2020, the time had come and we received a huge Word file and even much larger image files. And it quickly became apparent that a treasure had been waiting for me here in every respect. Usually we do not have time to really read an entire manuscript, but in the course of the preparations, I took every opportunity to read one or another chapter or subchapter. And I also almost managed to find a convincing reason for doing so. And so I learned a lot. Usually I guide books with much text and only few images through the publication process. But here it was a special experience for me and also for my colleague Anne Hirschelmann from the production team, who says hello, to work with Naomi on this book. But the treasure I was speaking about has more facets, because already in the email it became obvious that with Naomi, a very special author had landed on my desk, and our communication was always very pleasant and enriching from the beginning on. And that was not the end. This year, a few weeks ago at the World Congress for Jewish Studies in Jerusalem, we finally met in person, and I would call it a match. I was very happy to finally meet her and to get to know her and to talk to her like face to face. And although we did not forget, but the book did not arrive in the mail, and Naomi left us her personal copy for our book exhibition, and it was one of the most requested books from all our books in the exhibition. So I'm happy that I've been involved in unearthing this treasure, and I hope, and not only me, but our entire editorial team, that more will follow. But for now, I wish us all an enriching and exciting evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Dr. Katrin Kogman to lead us as our chair in the academic portion of the evening. Professor,
may I just intervene for half a second and thank
Go
Alice
for it, Naomi.
for your kind words and endless patience with me. I mean, I can't count the emails that have been traveling back and forth with some funny requests, or including the way the book is presented, not in the manner that the entire series shows. And I'm so pleased and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, so good evening. Just a brief note, I'm not Shulamit Lederman. I'm using Shulamit's laptop, but I'm Katrin Kogman, and I guess most people recognize that. So after these opening remarks, I wish to welcome you all to the academic part, into the Zoom room of the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center, where we are gathered to celebrate the appearance of Naomi Feuchtwanger-Sarig's book. Thy Father's Instruction is a unique book that deals with a unique manuscript, an object that delivers some sort of private greeting from the past, a gift bequeathed by a father, a man named Eliezer ben Mordechai, to his son, perhaps at the occasion of the latter's wedding, in Ashkenaz at the threshold between the Middle Ages and the early modern period. In a very careful and meticulous in-depth analysis, Naomi's book reveals Eliezer's educational message, his moralistic heritage, so to speak, a heritage that is rooted in tradition and at the same time unique, fresh, and unusual. And I think what makes this book Naomi's book so special is that she really balances out this traditional part and the innovative and the unique aspects of it. Three speakers will share with us their thoughts and insights on Naomi's book for today from three different perspectives. And without further ado, I would like to introduce very briefly, because time is short, the first of them, Richard Cohen from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Well known as a historian of the Jews in the 20th century, in particular in France during the Shoah, he contributed to the visual turn in history and published Jewish Icons, Art and Society in Modern Europe, which appeared at the University of California Press in 1998. Ever since, he was and is involved in various endeavors that consider Jewish culture at the junction between history and the study of visual culture. Among them, 2001, the emergence of Jewish arts in 19th century Europe at the Jewish Museum in New York. 2007, the conference volume, Tmuna v'Tzlil, Omanut u'Muzika v'Historia, and of course, the long-term project he conducted together with Miriam Reiner at on the art of Samuel Hirschenberg, with a book that appeared last spring at the Littman Library and will be celebrated next week, actually. Reading the Nuremberg Miscellany through the eyes of Naomi Feuchtwanger-Sarig is the title of his contribution tonight. Please, Richard.
Allow me to begin my remarks with words of praise for the publisher, de Gruyter, and for the Germanisches National Museum in Nuremberg for their remarkable efforts to enable the publication of this book in the most aesthetic manner, and to the museum for its making the manuscript open for all to use. We, the readers, are granted the possibility of reading clearly an impressively attractive text while seeing the entire Nuremberg Miscellany together with many other images that the author has referred to in her painstaking attempt to uncover the intentions and designs of Eliezer, the son of Mordechai, to which I will devote my lecture. However, before entering into more serious issues, I would like to express my thanks to the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center for inviting me to participate in this evening, and especially to Adi Moskovich for her tireless efforts to organize it. They have given me the possibility of congratulating Naomi publicly on a remarkable achievement, the product, I imagine, of more than 2, possibly 3, decades of intensive and productive scholarship that would certainly have brought undue pride and satisfaction to her late great-grandparents who were dedicated to Jewish art and culture, to her late grandmother, Henrietta Feuchtwanger, a woman of much charm and warmth, whom I eulogized in 1991, to her late mother, whom I enjoyed teaching at some point, as I'm sure it does today to her father and her immediate family. allow me to relate to her this evening in a less formal manner as Naomi. How did she conceive of her scholarly task upon encountering the Miscellany? In a sense, it mirrored what she believed was the way the artist had worked, quote, with his eyes, knowledge, and original fantasy alone. Working carefully and in tremendous detail on each and every image in the manuscript, she has sought to reveal him, quote, as an artist and an educated person, his breadth of knowledge, both as a man of the world and as a literate Jew, his rich associative universe, and even his refined sense of humor. Moreover, she is constantly engaged in trying to put the manuscript as a whole and individual images in particular into a social and cultural context, necessarily based on a truly extensive and cross-disciplinary reading and investigation of countless manuscripts, Jewish in general. Sadly, her great efforts to find out the full name of the author, its exact provenance before coming into the hands of their Germanisches Nationalmuseum in the 19th century, and the name of the recipient of the manuscript remain a desideratum. But she has convincingly associated the patron and the recipient to the Ulma Günzburg dynasty, and that the artist created the manuscript on his own as a gift to his son. She sees him, quote, primarily as a man of the quill, whose illustrations, quote, reflect his cultural background, immediate milieu, and visual fantasy. But she goes a step further, making the claim that the Miscellany can shed a new light on the relatively incomplete culture and religious history of early modern German Jews by offering, quote, a glimpse into the daily life of a traditional, affluent Southern German Jew, focusing on important rituals of the course of Jewish life and year cycle. Herein lies the ultimate goal of Naomi's study. How does the Nuremberg Miscellany transmit the cultural world of this 16th century Jew? From chapter 5 to chapter 11, from pages 68 to 424, for those who have not held this book in their hands, she takes us on a journey. Have I been, is the PowerPoint available now?
You'll need to share your screen with us, please.
Excuse me?
Would you like me to share the screen with your presentation, please?
Will you?
Yes, of course. 1 minute. Okay. You able to?
Okay. Now you jumped into the middle. Okay. I think you're going to have to show the, I'll ask you to show the images. I'm going to return. From chapter 5 to chapter 11, she takes us on a journey through the 89 folios of the Miscellany, exploring, or rather excavating, every detail on them. From her inquiry into the front page of the manuscript, image 1, one sees clearly the methodology that guided Naomi's research. Concerned with deciphering the artist's construction of the page, she dwells on the placing and appearance of the two individuals holding the book with its inscription, the significance of the four animals and their positioning, and the meaning and implications of the Hebrew inscriptions, image 2. In the case of each one of these details, she looks for comparative material in Jewish and non-Jewish sources, visual and textual. For example, with regard to the four animals, the leopard, the eagle, the hart, and lion, she relates to the four animal motif in Christian religious art, and Jewish textual associations, bringing various visual examples and extensive bibliography in each case, while claiming that the artist, quote, living in the midst of a Christian cultural milieu, must have been familiar with these motifs. And his choice of animals and details, quote, are meant to localize the home of the patron and the recipient within the Duchy of Swabia. She is clearly aware that the comparisons are assumptions, sometimes somewhat daring ones, but once she brings them, we are treated to learned expositions on the visual or textual sources she has related to. But if we look at image 3, at times I would think her erudition gets the better of her. At least to my mind, I wondered, for example, whether the engaging images and discussion of the arches, where one is supported by a war elephant at the beginning of the manuscript, went off to attractive tangents, but belabored the reader's attention. Nonetheless, Naomi skillfully creates associations and connections that are simply riveting. Take the example, the extensive 40-page discussion of image 4 on folios 2V, 3R of the Miscellany, which deal with the visit of 3 individuals to Abraham and Sarah to inform them of their future son, relating to Breshit 18:1-22. The 3 guests with wings, the positioning of Abraham, who brings to the table a decanter of wine and maybe some bread, while his back is turned to Sarah and separated by a tall tree with fruit and birds, the wording on the bowl of the table, Gimel Lashonot Bechardal, the unicorn at the bottom of the text, they're all food for Naomi's ability to bring in Jewish and non-Jewish texts with comparative visual associations. Any one of the discussions on any one of the figures or particulars in this image can gain your attention. But for one who has a particular attraction to the unicorn, after several wonderful visits to its remarkable appearances in the Cluny tapestries from circa 1500, images 5 and image 6, let me share with you briefly Naomi's intriguing discussion on the unicorn as a harbinger of parenthood, image 7. After providing some basic knowledge on the appearance of the unicorn in Western culture and its presence and associations in Christian iconography, she mentions the identification of the unicorn as the Tachash, the desert creature that figured in various places in the Bible and is said in the Babylonian Talmud to have only one horn. She then relates to the unicorn's appearance in the well-known Sefer Minhagim, the customs book from 1593 for the month of Elul, and the reading of the Haftarah for the second day of Rosh Hashanah that relates to Rachel, who was a childless woman for a long period. All these references lead her to conclusions that the artist of the Miscellany could have known these sources and thus brings the image of the unicorn, look at image 8, as a universal visual symbol of virginity and, quote, broadened its symbolism even further by projecting it onto one of the earliest childless mothers, Sarah, who was finally blessed with a son, end quote. Such interpretations abound in her text. Now we're going to look at image 9. Her eagle eyes, and the pun will be clear in a moment, caught the word nodeh in the benediction after meals and left us with a revealing exploration into each of the letters, in particular with the nun. What does the audience looking at these letters see? What do you see? Indeed, you see eyeglasses, but rather bow spectacles that Naomi informs us were popular in southern Germany when the artist worked. She does not speculate whether Eliezer may have worn such glasses, but does relate to his inclusion of a text from the Talmud, from Sotah, quote, only one who is of generous disposition, Ein Tov, should be allowed to lead the benediction, commenting that this was probably, quote, his own visual midrash on the text, or I submit, possibly, a reference to his own glasses. Close reading and close looking take time and energy and imagination, as is also apparent from her treatment of the horse in image 10 in the Purim's story. Noting appropriately that Eliezer enjoyed decorating initial letters and words that were related to the text, here to a section from the Grace After Meals said on Purim, she took note of the Lamed in Al. Clearly you see the horse with his green head and his hoofed leg. Naomi is right on target, observing that Eliezer created this Lamed. Eliezer created this Lamed, so that Eliezer created this Lamed to point to the climax of the Esther scroll, when Mordechai is told by the king to lead him through the city on a horse and announce his demise, thus supporting her claim that the horse in the Lamed is not accidental, as she says, but rather plays a significant role as a visual anchor to the Purim story. She does something similar with other initial words. Take a look at image 11 with the word Meroz, the piyut recited on Hanukkah after the lights are lit, educing the artist's intention to provide a graphic depiction of the first stanza of the piyut. Using animals to express his interpretation of the text, we see the head of an animal sticking out his tongue, related as Naomi astutely remarks to the words Mitzal HaMenabeach that may relate to a midrashic source, alluding to Nebuchadnezzar and his desire to have Jews relate to him as their God. Moreover, she notes that in the Mem, a hand is seen, as you see, pointing to a strange-looking head with ears or horns, indeed a kind of satyr, who, as Naomi suggests, quote, may be a grotesque portrayal of the great foe Nebuchadnezzar. The very extensive chapter entitled Getting Married in Ashkenaz, that expounds on the nature of marriage in Jewish tradition, offers a wide range of insights on the visual elements that appear in the Miscellany on folios 33V to 34V. Please look at image 12, where we see the bride on the left arriving in a closed carriage to meet the groom, who is seen arriving as well. Both bride and groom have coronets on their heads. Their dress and attire bring Naomi to claim that this is a further example of how the Miscellany relates to the higher economic level of Jewish society at the time, an argument that fits well with the representation of the bride and groom with coronets and elegant clothes under the canopy in open air, as you see in image 13. Moreover, the visual comparisons she draws from various sources, Jewish and general, from a ketubah from Krems from the late 14th century, to woodcuts by Yost Amman, to elaborating on the dress of the bride and groom, are intriguing, as are the textual sources that she brings to widen the discussion on marriage customs of Jews and Christians at the end of the 16th century. And of course, other artifacts in the image of the wedding scene are treated, from the kutrolf, the decanter held by the officiator of the ceremony, the ring in the hand of the groom, and the lute played by the figure on the left. Though one of the more engaging images in the Miscellany necessarily deserves the attention that Naomi has granted it. Please see image 14. I am referring to folio 35V, where we see a man and a woman dancing, followed by a wolf and a bear, each playing a different instrument. Here we have in her interpretation a clear answer to her overriding question. How does the Nuremberg Miscellany transmit the cultural world of this 16th century Jew? Though it is clear that music and dancing were often part of the Jewish celebration of a marriage, the presence of the animals demanded special attention, as no such written or visual source in Jewish tradition could be brought to explain their presence in the Miscellany. Here, Naomi looked for possible influences from 16th century Germany. She came across the Schembartlauf processions, a kind of Mardi Gras common in Nuremberg until they were terminated decades before the Miscellany was produced. But her inquiry into this tradition is impressive, and her qualified conclusion is plausible, and I quote, "The influence of the Schembartlauf can account for the depiction of musicians disguised as animals in the manuscript and further illuminate details of the dancing couple's habit while shedding light on the particular selection of the musical instruments in the scene and the belt with a bell dangling from it, swaying from that woman's hand. These, thus concluding that the Miscellany does represent, quote, an affinity to the city and the surroundings where the community memory of the Schembartlauf remained very much alive." The final two engaging chapters of the book relate to the ceremony of circumcision. Please look at image 15, the Holocaust ceremony and home liturgies for the Jewish festivals. Each of these two chapters reveal the depth of Naomi's desire to uncover the traditions associated with the ceremonies, as can be seen by the extensive references to a great range of literary sources and scholarship. In conclusion, Naomi Feuchtwanger-Sarig has added to the Library of Jewish Art the most important contribution that brings together a profound awareness of how such a 16th century manuscript was created, enriching our understanding of its cultural and historical context. Much more can be said of this work, as we will hear from the learned speakers who follow me. But let me conclude with one last remark. I'm certain that Eliezer, the son of Mordechai, probably from the Ulma Günzburg dynasty, would have loved to meet Naomi, the daughter of Dina and Moshe Michael from the Feuchtwanger dynasty, and to learn from her, after years of research, what was deep in his conscience and background, biodin uveloyodin, knowingly and unknowingly, that created images inspired, as she says, by wit, humor, associative thinking, and puns. Thank you.
Richie, I can't begin to thank you, but I want to, and I won't, because you know how indebted I am for your scholarship and wise advice throughout the years. But I will add something that is written in the book, in the introduction, that connects the two families. Because as I found out, I'm the 14th great whatever granddaughter of the progenitor of the Günzburg family. So somehow things connect, and the book was meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie, for this very special angle on Naomi's book, which is, which you can develop a great deal of several special angles. Our next speaker is Yosef Yitzhak Lifshitz, formerly from the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center and now from the Shalem College, a scholar of the history of Ashkenaz with a focus on minhagim and halacha. In 2015, he published Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg and the Foundation of Jewish Political Thought at the Cambridge University Press. And around the same time appeared his book at Hillel Ben Chaim Library at Kibbutz HaMeuchad on the dialectical thinking of the Ashkenazi pietists. He also takes a special interest in economics and welfare against the background of Jewish thought, as demonstrated by his Judaism, Law, and the Free Market from 2012. I invite Joseph Yitzhak Lifshitz to speak about the role of the aesthetics in halacha and minhag. Please, Joseph.
Thank you very much. I would like to start. I was really in awe with and inspiration with the description of Professor Cohen. It was magnificent. I wanted to start with compliments to Dr. Feuchtwanger. We had such good friends, and it's really a pleasure for me to I was immediately, when she asked me to participate and to talk at this conference, I immediately, of course, said yes. Again, I want to thank Professor Cohen for this extremely detailed and rich and correct way of describing the book. This was, you made us all a great service for whoever didn't read, and even for people who did read like me. And I think I was present at the production of this book for several years. This was really really amazing. So thank you. Naomi already thanked you before me. Okay, what I want to do, and I did it already this year for another book of, I'm not going to repeat myself, but I'm going to start with the same protagonist who I admire, that is not connected to Jewish art or to the study of Jewish art or the study of art altogether, but the psychology of design. And I want to show how it's connected to the work of Dr. Feuchtwanger. Donald Norman, which I show one of his books, helped me to understand many things that we have in our everyday things that we are using, and the logic and...
Yitzhak, would you mind putting it on full screen? I think we'd all see it a little bit better.
Oh, I didn't put it. I'm sorry. A full screen. Okay, 1 second. No, that doesn't work.
So never mind. We can make it out. Keep going. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, I'm sorry. I tried at home. I don't know why it doesn't work. So I'm sorry. Okay. So in the other conference of another book that I presented, I showed something, different ideas of Donald Norman. But Donald Norman talks about the idea of a platform in designing many of our inventions. The idea that Donald Norman expresses can be presented very well with a typewriter. We all, or especially people of our age, of my age, remember that the mechanical typewriter. And if anybody is asking why are the what is called the quirt I have it here, where the letters are not in an alphabetical order. And the reason is that when the typewriter, when the secretaries were typing very quickly, the hands of the typewriter were mixing with one another, were entangling. And we all remember how these things happened again and again, and we had to remove them manually. So the letters were spread in a way that letters that usually don't come together will be close to one another, so they will not get entangled. And the question is why this, what is called the quirt keyboard, was not changed when we have computers. And the reason is that when computers were, when we started using digital typewriting, we are still accustomed to the old way of typing in a manual typewriter. So that shows how one invention set up a platform that continues when the practical use of it ceased to exist. That happens again and again. We inherit the same size of streets that we used to have when people were walking on the street, when carriages with horses were riding on the street, are still used on the same side of the road in England, not in the rest of the world, but in the English, on the British world, we are still driving on the left-hand side of the road, because this was the practical way of riding on horses. One example of such a platform is that the carriage of horses, the size of the carriage of horses, was followed also by the train, and then the Apollo rocket that was sent to the moon was used by the same size. So the parts of the rocket that were delivered on trains will decide on the size of the rocket itself. Usually the reason for that is that although we think of ourselves as rational thinkers, that we function, everything that we do, we function rationally, the truth of the matter is that we, most of the time, we run on automatic pilot. We always rely on automatic things that we are accustomed to. All this introduction, I brought another example. The phonograph of Bell and the gramophone was used to, there were two inventors, it was Bell and Volta, who created one the gramophone and one the phonograph. Bell was a designer who was interested in making the best designing of phonograph, of gramophone that he can make. But he didn't make so much money from it as much as Volta. And the reason is that Bell tried to make the best gramophone he can make, technically. Volta thought of the fact of the way that people will use his gramophone, meaning the kind of recordings that he will deliver in the market. So the difference is that Bell did not invest so much money on paying big artists on the records he printed, but Volta thought of the market. So he paid a lot of money to people like Caruso to record his records, and people were interested, even though the quality that they heard in their living rooms did not resonate exactly the voice of Caruso, but everybody felt that they have Caruso in their living room. The results were that people bought records of Volta and not records of Bell. So Bell had a superior gramophone, but people bought Volta. The platform of records was more important than the platform of the record player itself. This whole introduction came to explain one thing. One of what I find Dr. Feuchtwanger the most innovative ideas that I find. I'm not I'm not an art historian, but what Dr. Feuchtwanger is saying is that many times when you find Jewish artifacts, they are borrowed from other instruments or other utensils that are common in the market where they live. So a goblet that is used for ordinary reasons become goblet, which I'll get further on, becomes a goblet for Kiddush.
Yitzhak,
yes.
If you've been advancing the slides, we're not seeing it.
No, I didn't. I'm waiting for it. I'll talk about it in a second.
Okay.
But I didn't bring examples for that yet. What Dr. Feuchtwanger is saying is that we always have to understand that people use goblets, kitchen utensils that they are accustomed to in their environment, also for religious purposes. the idea of borrowing is true in law as well. Alan Watson was probably the greatest historian of Roman law. And in this book, the evolution of law, he expresses the idea. I'll read what he says here. In most places, at most times, borrowing is the most fruitful source of legal change. The borrowing may be from within the system, by analogy from negligence in tort to negligence in contract, for instance, etc., etc. I'm not going to read the whole his whole phrase here or introduction to his article, which is repeated in this book. But he shows how we usually think of legal systems that are based purely on legal reasons. But as it happens many times, jurists, judges, and lawyers many times borrow existing laws. It's much easier for judges and for any construction of a new law to use a law that is in existence already. Israelis are accustomed to that. I mean, we are. I don't think that that at this conference we have many lawyers, but we know that in Israel, the Israeli system borrowed from the Turkish law, later on from the British law, and only in the what is called Israeli law is in construction all the time. But a lot of it is based on previous legal systems. It's much easier for us to base our decisions on what is known already and what is common already. So the idea of borrowing laws from other legal systems and borrowing utensils from other sources, this is a common thing. And I think that the principle, the intellectual principle that Dr. Feuchtwanger is bringing into the fore is true in many, many fields. And I am completely convinced. Okay, what I want to do now, in pages 238 to page 241, I wasn't able to show all the pictures. Unfortunately, I'm not good at that. But in figure 90, whoever has the book, Naomi presents a goblet that is held by hand. It looks like a huge goblet. And forgive me if I'll call you Naomi, right? So Naomi presents this picture. Wait, this is not there, but I show the buccal pokel. Is that how it's pronounced? Is presented.
Buccal pokal.
Buccal pokal. Okay, and I managed even to get this picture of Albert Dürer, which you presented in the book, and you show how this goblet was influenced and was really borrowed from the existing goblets in the area. But I would like to suggest, or may to argue with you, Naomi, about the size. In page 240, you claim the following. While the artist of Nuremberg Miscellany was by no means a master of proportions, the dimensions of the goblet depicted on Fall 99V are nonetheless meant to be impressive. So you claim, and you claimed it to me, and I agreed with you, but I tend to disagree now. You claim that the size or the emphasis came to emphasize something. I want to suggest that it may be that they did use big goblets. I already claimed that in the book that I hope that will be published soon, that in the synagogues, I'm just showing other goblets. In the synagogues, Jews used to have huge...
Yitzhak, again, we're still on the slide with the typewriter. So if you've been
Really?
advancing, we don't see it.
I'm sorry. Oh, phew. This is really a big shame. Okay, let's see how I do it. Let me just stop the. Okay, I'll do it again. Okay, does it move now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just leave it in this.
Okay, this is the cover.
Okay, so you can see the carpets.
Yes.
That's really a shame. Okay, thank you for pointing it out. I want to come back to this picture soon, but this one is not present in your book, and I want to say the following. One of the phenomenon that we can see in medieval Ashkenaz is that I claim that when the Kiddush was made Friday night in the synagogue, the whole congregation drank from the wine. I suggested that drinking from the wine by all the members of not very healthy, but all members of the synagogue, of the community, was done to participate in what Corner used to call drinking of oath in guilds. Corner in the early 60s of the 20th century claimed that the guild does not represent only an economic society, but also a very social, deep connection between the members. And there used to be, in early medieval time, used to be some sort of a ceremony in the forest of men that used to drink together from one goblet of beer. The drinking together, I claimed, was done the same in the synagogues. The synagogue was, the members of the synagogue drank together from the whole, from one goblet. And it came to help not only to enhance, not only for religious reasons, but to enhance the togetherness of the community. So they needed a big goblet. Now this big goblet from Schwabe, from the beginning of the 18th century, is of a Chevra Kadisha goblet, a very big goblet that was done for many years. I've seen in the museum in Prague. I don't know if this one in Vienna also pretty big. I couldn't find a picture of the one in Prague, but the huge goblet that was used for the yearly ceremony of the Chevra Kadisha. The people of the Chevra Kadisha once a year, the ceremony, and also drank from one goblet. So there was an idea of drinking from one goblet, and you need to have a goblet that will be big enough that everybody will have enough wine to drink from it. I claim that the same thing happened in the house. Until now, people sip a little bit from the wine of when the father makes the kiddush. The whole members of the family drink from this wine. In many families now, wine is given in little goblets, so they don't need to drink from the mouth of the father of the house. But in many houses, it's still done, and therefore the goblet is big. So I claim that the goblet, that there is a reason why the size was big. So although I accept completely the idea that Dr. Feuchtwanger is making, that not only law is borrowed, not only that customs are borrowed, but of course utensils are borrowed and design is borrowed. Sometimes there is an intrinsic or internal reason for the design of utensils, and the size is one of them. So if I'm correct, it may be that the size of this goblet that is depicted in the Miscellany was really big. I don't know if it was as huge as it's depicted. And we can see, again, I'm sorry that I couldn't find a picture, but you can see that he has the full palm of the leg of the goblet. So it's not only that it's depicted big, but also the proportions have to fit to the hand, the full hand of the person who is holding the goblet. So I assume that goblets were really bigger. Just to finish the story, whoever can read Hebrew, I'll just read the translation. Rav Natonai Gaon, this is brought from Babylon, that I'll bring the other one. It's brought also in Victory that the whole synagogue is drinking. The whole congregation is drinking from the wine. This is repeated in Machzor Vitri, which is in the Bet Midrash, the school of Rashi, the same thing, that the whole congregation is drinking. And then the drinking of the wine from the goblet, they thought is healthy for you. We think otherwise today, and so we don't follow this instruction. There are other halachic instructions that I don't want to get into them, so it's not even done. But whoever prays in the synagogues abroad, especially in Europe, the children are all surrounded. A kiddush is made still, not in Israel, unfortunately, but abroad. A kiddush is made in shul, in the synagogue, and the little children are drinking from it, not adults. And children are lining up to drink from the wine. It's a very big honor. Usually it's grape juice, not wine. So it's part of the religious experience of children in synagogues on Friday night and on the holidays. So anyway, to sum up, I completely agree with the borrowing of a design. I yet think that sometimes intrinsic internal reasons help to understand the shape of religious utensils. Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much. There's one thing I wanted to add. I'm sorry, this is not on the order. The fact that you added, and this are many thanks to the Gruyter, the fact that the Miscellany is printed in so well and so nicely at the appendix helped me to find also the punctuation, the precise punctuation of the time, which are different from our time, but that's for a different time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Yitzhak, as always, you're bringing your new innovative angle, and that really calls for discussion between you and me. I'll have to check, and that may turn into another paper, not necessarily a book, but definitely will lead to something. So thank you for bringing out this this hypothesis, which really stands to reason. We'll have to wait and see. You and I will try to deal with it from now on, and I hope together as we've always collaborated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yitzhak, for this very interesting insight into thoughts of design and industrial design. And it's just funny, that little Corona typewriter that we saw for some while, it stands in my living room, and it's actually, apropos design, it's a laptop, it's a foldable travel little typewriter. It's really beautiful. And yeah, thank you again. I think this is a very interesting angle on how we might actually look at all these daily life utensils that we see over and over again in manuscripts and images. And so I think this was very important. Our final speaker is Andreas Lehnertz, a fellow, currently a fellow at the Martin Buber Society of Fellows at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He graduated from the University of Trier with a study on Jewish seals in the medieval German Empire. And his book is likewise entitled thus, Authentication and Self-Representation of Jewish Men and Women which appeared in German in 2000 and in Germany in 2020 at the Harrassowitz Verlag in Wiesbaden. After his PhD studies, he was a postdoc fellow at the ERC project Beyond the Elite, Jewish Daily Life in Medieval Europe, led by Elisheva Baumgarten at the HU. And recently he received the Ephraim Orbach postdoc grant from the Memorial Foundation of Jewish Culture and the Gerald Bestheimer Early Career Development Prize from the Leo Baeck Institute in New York. His postdoc research discusses imagery and craftsmanship, thus, for example, a new take on the Jewish hat, and a current project on Jewish artisans. He will speak about the Nuremberg Miscellany between the Middle Ages and the early modern period. Please, Andreas.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction, Katrin. You all see my slides, right?
Yes.
I also wish to thank the Goldstein-Goren Diaspora Research Center, to Adi and Sarah for the invitation to speak here today. And a special thank you to Naomi, for the beautiful book you wrote. I'm delighted and honored by this invitation and the opportunity to give a short reflection on this praiseworthy study conducted by a scholar who is also a dear friend of mine. When Naomi first asked me to speak at her book launch, I immediately said yes, though without taking into consideration a pressing question, that is, what could a historian of the Middle Ages say about such a fine piece of scholarship on early modern book art, but simply venerating it, finding joy and having nachas in reading it, and by basking in the beautiful manuscript facsimile at the end of the book. Richard Cohen and Isaac Lifshitz just showed us two beautiful ways of looking into and reading Naomi's book. It became clear how much we can learn from this study for different areas of research. Another way that comes to my mind when looking at the Nuremberg Miscellany is this early modern work of art dated according to its colophon to the year 1589 is how medieval it actually appears. Indeed, Naomi notes this in the very beginning of her first chapter, writing, the Nuremberg Miscellany follows a tradition of Hebrew manuscripts from all parts of the Jewish diaspora. It is, however, a work of scribal art and illumination that has largely fallen out of fashion with the introduction and proliferation of printed books in the Jewish world. Reading this, I could not help but wonder how many Hebrew manuscripts were still produced at the time of the Nuremberg Miscellany by the end of the 16th century. There was an apparent decline in manuscript production, which followed a period of expulsions and renewed violence against Jewish men and women from the German territories since the later 14th into the 16th century. Think about the pogrom in Vienna in 1421 or the expulsion of the Jews from Regensburg in 1519, to name but two of the most prominent events. The interesting link between the Middle Ages and the early modern period, however, makes the Nuremberg Miscellany a particularly important manuscript for me. Suppose its skilled scribe, compiler, and the untrained illuminator were indeed, as Naomi suggests, I believe very convincingly, one and the same person, a father of an affluent family in southern Germany. He then was a father who dedicated this manuscript as a wedding gift to his son. In that case, it was not only a legacy of traditions and customs that this father, Eliezer ben Mordechai, wanted to pass down to his son, but it was also the fact that a handwritten manuscript was part of this legacy, an attempt to pass down a vanishing profession. The Nuremberg Miscellany, therefore, would have been in so many ways much more extraordinary than a mass-produced printed book on paper, as it was the dominant medium in the 16th century. In her book, Naomi sheds light on the images in the Nuremberg Miscellany by comparing them with now known illustrations appearing in the medieval manuscripts. In medieval manuscripts, some date up to 300 years before the time of the Miscellany. These are additional indicators showing how rooted in medieval tradition this early modern manuscript actually is. A not uncommon critique medieval historians voice of early modern scholars is that they forgot to firmly root their subjects in the medieval period. This is especially true when it comes to illumination of book art, often viewed in relation to print and not to the older traditions of illumination. But Naomi roots her subject in its medieval tradition quite brilliantly. Her book serves as a very welcome bridge between the medieval and early modern world of scholarship that still all too often fail to communicate. Today, I wish to share with you some thoughts that came to my mind when reading Naomi's book through the prism of a social historian of the Middle Ages, and I wish to discuss two comparative examples of Jewish daily life and ritual I find striking in the Nuremberg Miscellany, namely the scene of circumcision and the scene of sanctifying the new moon. I will not provide in-depth analysis of these scenes, but rather try to emphasize how we can read the Nuremberg Miscellany as an early modern book rooted in medieval tradition and what this manuscript can teach us about the Middle Ages. Let me begin with my first example, the scene of circumcision found in Naomi's book on page 353. Last year, Sarit Shalev-Eni studied a prayer book, a Meroz, from about the mid-15th century, which scholars have ascribed to Rabbi Abraham ben Asher Katzenellenbogen, a member of the rabbinical court in Regensburg. According to Sarit Shalev-Eni, the manuscript consisting of 3 sections is small in its format, being around 200 on 150 millimeters. It opens with the evening prayer for daily Shabbat and the Day of Atonement prayer, followed by the morning prayer for Shabbat and the benedictions for various occasions. Halachic rules on the kashrut of lambs, slaughtering, and circumcision, including parts of Maharil's book of customs, Sefer Maharil, as well as comments and editions of the scribe are written on folios 24 recto to 39 verso. A collection of piyutim for holidays appear at the end. This book manuscript, like Naomi's book, can tell us a lot about fathering children and the perspective of fathers among the children, especially among their sons. While a father very likely made the Nuremberg Miscellany for his son, the Meroz of Rabbi Abraham ben Asher Katzenellenbogen was the book for its own private use. We can see how this book was gradually filled with other texts, comments, ink drawings, and beautifully colored images. It looks very likely, as Sarit Shalev-Eni has shown, that Abraham wrote all these texts or copied them, and that he drew ink and color images. The combination and interplay between image and text allow the interpretation of Abraham as its artist and owner. A striking example that includes the theme of fathering is the section with the manual for circumcision practices. Here, the owner and scribe Abraham noted the following: "And I was called to circumcise my son on the 9th of Av, and I had to circumcise my other son on the Day of Atonement to make atonement for me by the blood of the covenant of circumcision." Abraham, a father of at least 2 sons, remembers here in a personal note next to the manual for circumcision exceptional circumstances for the circumcision of his 2 sons, which he himself performed. Okay. Additionally, a drawing of a circumcision scene is found on the same page. It includes the banner saying, "And Abraham circumcised," alluding to the biblical theme in Genesis 21:4, reading, "And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac." However, by leaving out the name Isaac, we may understand Abraham, our scribe and owner of this manuscript, would memorize his own son here instead. We can imagine the emotional value invested in such a personal manuscript, filled with notes connecting biblical images and customs with the owner's memory. The Nuremberg Miscellany, too, provides opportunities to reach such scenes into personal experiences, though here it seems to me the father presented the book to his son as a wedding gift, a very precious gift indeed. This would allow the son to carry with him precious memories from his own father. The circumcision scene you see here in the Nuremberg Miscellany would allow the son to ponder on his own circumcision done by his father and possibly on the circumcision of his future son. Rabbi Abraham ben Asher Katzenellenbogen's Meroz is a beautiful example of a private prayer book, and we may assume that he was probably using it during synagogue service. Sarit Shalev-Eni mentions an exciting scene of conflict between such beautiful, decorated, and illuminated prayer books and the older, more straightforward, text-focused communal prayer books. when the famous Rabbi Jacob ben Moses Morling, the Maharil, came to Regensburg sometime before 1427, the following took place. They, the community leaders, showed their respect for him, Maharil, by giving him magnificent machzorim to pray with, and he did not want to pray in public, but from a machzor, indeed, for the public, since it was written with the intention of fulfilling a religious obligation, whereas, in case of the magnificent machzorim, the scribe had not intended to fulfill such an obligation but rather to glorify himself. It is striking to see how beautiful illuminated prayer books were current in the 15th century Regensburg. Such books were objects used by the more affluent members of the communities to proudly demonstrate their wealth and social status. However, they also carried emotional value and could combine the legacy of Jewish laws and customs with very personal memoria. Similar to a Rabbi Abraham's private machzor, the Nuremberg Miscellany, produced more than 100 years later, appears to be written, compiled, and illuminated step by step by the same sort of person, a learned father. In the case of the Nuremberg Miscellany, this book, with its strong father-child focus, might have been intended as a wedding gift for the father to his son. This way, the father left a moral legacy and a manual for behavior, a true mirror of doctrine and morals. It's a very personal object with presumably an incredible emotional value. From the description and comparison of the scenes of circumcision, a true seal of Abraham, Chotamto shel Avraham, I wish to move on to my second example, which is this waxen seal impression you see here. Personal seals, which I have studied for years, are another excellent example of material objects as personal belongings and a medium for self-representation and identity beyond book manuscripts. With their combination of text and images attached to written records, seals transmit a message to their viewers. Owners of such seals were often tempted to express something in their seals with their minimal space of about 2 or perhaps 3 centimeters in diameter that would stand as tas pro toto for them, representing their identity. See the seal of Jacob from Trier, my hometown. I wish to dwell on this example for a few minutes, and soon you will see why. Attached to a record dated to the year 1345, and today heavily defective, after all seals were impressed into the wax and therefore very fragile, Jacob's seal shows a reference to what we would call the man in the moon. It is a symbolic depiction of the esoteric idea of God's throne, Kisei HaKavod, in which the face of Jacob, itself a symbol of for the congregation of Israel, is engraved. This makes Jacob's seal a chanting seal, meaning the seal image alludes to his name. But one is also tempted to argue that the seal demonstrates how Jacob claims himself a place in the afterlife. However, another striking fact is the use of much script in his seal that measures only 2 centimeters in diameter. Not only can we still decipher Jacob's Hebrew name in the defective seal, Yaakov, once followed by a now lost patronym, and most likely also by a Latin inscription of his name. Also, the seal image bears a Latin inscription within its coat of arms. Now, scholars of seals repeatedly emphasize that inscriptions within the coat of arms usually were used to bestow important information concerning the bearer of the object. And indeed, as if Jacob wanted to make it very clear, even to non-Jewish viewers of his seal, the inscription of the coat of arms too reads, now in Latin letters, Jacobi. So Jacobi, the genitive of Jacobus, meaning belonging to Jacob. This seal, this face engraved onto the throne of God, belongs to Jacob. Finally, using so many inscriptions is also striking when considering Jacob's profession. Jacob is mentioned in the Latin sources as a Jewish scribe, meaning most likely a sopher, as was, so it seems, the writer and father of the Nuremberg Miscellany. Now, luminaries with anthropomorphic features are also depicted in the Nuremberg Miscellany. One particular scene is the blessing of the new moon, whose depiction has a beautiful tradition in medieval illuminated manuscripts, such as the Mahzor Lipsier studied by Katrin Kogman-Appel. The esoteric tradition of Jacob's face engraved onto the throne of God has been studied in depth by Elliot Wolfson. He ascribed them to the small circle of Chassidei Ashkenaz of the 12th and 13th century. But as Naomi emphasizes in her book, also the famous Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg, Maharam, refers to this esoteric reading at the end of the 13th century, when we have only a few traces left of the Chassidei Ashkenaz circle. According to the Maharam, one blessed the new moon by utilizing an order of words for the blessing that resembles the name Yaakov. The prayer, also emphasized by Elliot Wolfson, reads, Baruch Yotzrecha, Baruch Osecha, Baruch Konecha, Baruch Borecha. That makes Yaakov. Moreover, and what I find particularly interesting is that the seal of Jacob described from the first half of the 14th century continues this tradition, and to my excitement, it is still a vivid tradition in the later 16th century, as we see in the Nuremberg Miscellany. Since the illumination here shows us the book in the hand of the praying person, we can envision how the son and owner of the manuscript could have read this text out aloud to himself or to others, or perhaps we may imagine the father himself holding this prayer book in his hand while reciting the new moon blessing. Owners of precious objects, either visual or written, or both, often used the opportunity to express a message to their viewers. These objects, book manuscripts, seals, and a variety of other artifacts were venerated, but also willingly used to express social, economic, and religious status and identity. But they can also be highly personal objects, reinforcing identities, imparting self-worth, and carrying with them precious personal memories. I hope I was able to show you by ways of the examples I presented how the Nuremberg Miscellany and Naomi's thorough analysis of it corresponds so deeply with the material evidence of the medieval period, and how both complement each other to better understand how these objects were used in practice, what they meant to those that made them, and what they reveal about the relationships people build with each other within the Jewish community or within their home. I loved how you, Naomi, took us on a journey through the Nuremberg Miscellany, showing how your reading and studying experience was such a personal endeavor. I think this is also what you achieved transmitting to your readers. So again, congratulations to you for such an essential contribution to the field and beyond. Since we both have a certain fascination and veneration for Yiddish, I will close with a Yiddish Broche for you, although Yiddish is what is actually missing in the Nuremberg Miscellany, a period of growing numbers of books in Yiddish. Noch mir wünschen, die Machaberte, als in die Tritt von dem reichen Buch sollen kommen noch andere, was wollen uns beleichten, noch mehrere Seiten von dem aschkenasischen Kultur. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. This was lovely.
You challenged us with your Yiddish, but you also challenged us with drawing the line, beautifully doing so, between the Middle Ages and my manuscript. Excuse me, Dr. Pommeranz, for naming it that, but it is mine, isn't it? In a way. So I learned from you as well so much, as I always do, even when, not even, but always, when we have meals together, when we have coffee together. This is lovely. This is lovely. Thank you so much.
Well, now it's actually your turn, Naomi, and I really again want to congratulate you very warmly. We have listened to just, oh, I don't know why my video all of a sudden disappeared, but here I am. Okay, sorry for that. We just learned about further links that tie the very rich visual language that we find in that book, in yours as well as the original manuscript, This was really an interesting additional third angle. Thank you very much, Andreas. And now it's again time to congratulate you, Naomi. I have read your book. I've written about your book. I have always thought when I was reading the book, I often thought that it really beautifully brings together a lot of your research interests over the years, as they were developing ever since we actually met back in the 1980s. And I remember your interest in Torah wimples and in weddings and in minhagim and in customs and minhagim books and in customs in general. And I think this kind of brings really together all of these strings. And what I found so fascinating was that, again, as I think all these three talks now demonstrated, the many angles that you can actually look at that manuscript and that you managed to put together. And I mean, there's always something left behind, and you can't cover everything. I mean, us, everybody, not you personally, but the very versatile discussions and the very versatile analyses of all that rich visual language that was really fascinating to read, and I'm very happy that you shared it with us in that beautiful book. And yes, definitely also the publisher has to be congratulated, because it's I really liked this facsimile at the end of the book. This is something that you rarely get when on monographs on a certain manuscript. So I really treasured this entire volume. So now it's your turn to say a few concluding remarks. You have already reacted to the individual speakers, but I guess you will probably do so again. I'm not introducing you, everybody knows you. I just mentioned a few of your research interests, but I think we are very well aware what your work has done here. So please, Naomi, it's the stage is yours. The Zoom room is yours.
Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you for forgiving me for not having written more. I think the Gruyter wouldn't have liked it, and I think that the readers wouldn't have liked it, and those who have to pay for it wouldn't have liked it. So I'm leaving something behind for perhaps another book, another paper, whatever. So I'm going to be very informal, taking a lighter tone, very personal. Thank you. Can you enlarge it full screen? Thank you, Adi. Great. And I'm in control, right? Perfect, as everything at the center. The Nuremberg Miscellany ignited my love at first sight back in the mid-1980s. Appointed by my teacher and mentor, Professor Bezalel Narkis, who ushered me into the paradise of illuminated manuscripts, my mission was to survey the manuscripts in libraries in Germany on behalf of the University's Center for Jewish Art. Like a turtle, I carried my belongings constantly on the go from one library to another, virtually taking a course in German geography and mastering the timetable of the Deutsche Bundesbahn. I saw thousands of manuscripts. For a book lover like myself, each one was a joy, but none of them touched me like the Nuremberg Miscellany. It made my heart miss more than just one beat. At the time, Dr. Eberhard Sklenska was the director of the library, Dr. Pommeranz's predecessor, and he was very helpful and very enthusiastic about the project. It must have been its modest appearance that spoke folk art, or so it seemed to me at first glance. Growing up in a museum of sorts among precious relics of the Jewish past that were carefully collected by my late grandfather, Dr. Johannes Feuchtwanger, instilled in me a special fondness for objects made of humble materials, often by non-professional craftsmen. The Miscellany, similarly, lacks the glamour of elite art. Yet it's amateurish. Why is it not moving? Okay, got it.
No, Naomi, you need to tell Adi when to advance it. You're not controlling it. Adi is sharing her screen. So
Just
please
tell
let
me
her know.
next slide and I'll just.
Or next click. Okay, thank you. Okay. I think I need, it's baffling. Okay, I think I need the next one. The Miscellany similarly lacks the glamour of elite art. Yet in its amateurish way, the lay artist nevertheless skillfully conveyed the magnificence of the state-of-the-art furniture and finest tableware and decorated the aristocratic homes with which he was familiar. And you'll pardon me, Yitzhak, we'll have further discussions and we'll see how we solve the problem. Next one, please. Reading the images whose intricacy I could not fully fathom during my first encounter with a manuscript was only one side of the coin. Visualizing the text was another. Reading it as a three-dimensional portrayal highlighted a brief comment in the secondary text that references a specific place in the synagogue wall against which bridegrooms are wont to dash the glass at the end of the wedding ceremony. This phrase that you see here on the screen reconnected me to my childhood memories at the Bezalel Museum in Jerusalem. Next one, please, Adi. And to the enigma of the Chopperstein, or marriage stone, a term I grew up with and did not fully comprehend at the time. Displayed horizontally in that museum, the marriage stone from Bingen, which had been uprooted from its original setting, immediately returned in my mind to its original upright position. As the time went by, my love for the Nuremberg Miscellany matured. Many years after my first encounter with the manuscript, I went for a second date with it, accompanied by my friend and colleague, Professor Elizabeth Hollander, who witnessed the glow in my eyes upon seeing it again. Next one, please. Utterly enamored, I ultimately asked for the bride's hand, so to speak, from Professor Ulrich Grossmann, the former director of the Germanisches Nationalmuseum. Joined by the best man, library director Dr. Johannes Pommeranz, I received both a blessing with a generous dowry, the permission to reproduce the entire manuscript and comparative material from the museum's treasures. I wish to take this opportunity in front of this august audience to express my deepest gratitude to you, Dr. Pommeranz, for enabling me to carry out this study and believing that one day it will come out. My appreciation goes also to the staff of the photographic department of the museum for their kind and professional support for me through all my requests. My research of the Nuremberg Miscellany was carried out in what has been my home since 2007. The Goldstein-Goren Research Center, Diaspora Research Center at Tel Aviv University. Ongoing support of the center by the Goldstein-Goren family made it possible for me and others to pursue years of research in the enriching environment of scholars. When he appointed me as a researcher, Professor Simcha Goldin, who has headed the center until 2021, reiterated his conviction that images and artifacts are as equally valid historical document, just as archival materials and responsive literature. His trust in my methodological path through the fields of art and cultural history led to fascinating and inspiring dialogues. Professor Goldin, or Simcha as we call him, thank you for your boundless encouragement. I likewise wish to express, please a click. Okay, and another one. Thank you. I likewise wish to express my gratitude towards the other members of the academic board of the series Rethinking Diaspora, Professor Stefan C. Reif, Professor Andreas Lehnertz, Professor Nachem Ilan, and Professor Roni Stauber, the present director of the center. Work on the miscellany was carried out also in 2 temporary residences. During the next 2 clicks, please. During 2 sabbatical fellowships, I shared ideas with my peers who represent a wide range of periods and disciplines, proving this to be a stoa of cultural exchange. I'm indebted to the Herbert D. Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and the Frankel Institute for Advanced Judaic Studies at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for the invaluable time I spent under their aegis. Next 2, please, clicks. Further affirmation of the importance of availing the Nuremberg Miscellany to public readership came from the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture, which supported my research for several years, and the World Union of Jewish Studies, which facilitated the embellishment of the book with its 160 images and the reproduction of the entire manuscript, all in color. Both institutions warrant my deep thanks for their sponsorship. For decades, the manuscript's been classified as a prayer book, and its decoration were described as folk art. Can I have the next one, please? In truth, however, it is an assemblage of carefully selected liturgical, minhagic, exegetical, homiletical, and moralistic texts. I therefore took the liberty of naming it the Nuremberg Miscellany. Its content suggests that it was meant as a missive of filial and Jewish conduct, a wedding gift from father to son. Inspired by the 4th commandment about honoring one's parents, which is inscribed on the left-hand side of the open book on the manuscript's initial page, and the biblical mandate in Proverbs 1:8, hear my son, thy father's instruction, and forsake not thy mother's teaching, the title for the book was my natural choice. Long after the invention of the printing press, the parchment manuscript is a rare example of a handwritten text richly embellished with illustrations, which in many ways carries on the long medieval tradition of scribal art all the way down to the very end of the 16th century. The scribe's masterful use of the quill comes to light in the diversity of fonts used in the main and secondary texts and the ornate initial words. Next one, please, Adi. Although hardly in line with the prevailing style of the late Renaissance, the illustrations of the Nuremberg Miscellany are nonetheless inspiring in their own way. Unskilled in the art of the paintbrush, the artists intuitively applied the convention of hieratic representation, giving prominence to the protagonists and diminishing the size of the secondary actor in the scene. Next one, please. He similarly distinguished between the respective heights of adults and youngsters. Employing practical scenography, the compositions are kept down to a lean and bare minimum and are set against a neutral background, which almost invariably lacks any specific indication of a recognizable setting. The next one, please. Some of the miscellany's many illustrations are of iconographic unica. One of them depicts the secular baby naming celebration known as Holekaish. In the image, the artists spare no effort to visually pronounce the wealth of the giftee and of his family. Notice the finely carved 4-poster bed, luxuriously cushioned. Can I have the next one, please? Great, thank you. Luxuriously, well, okay, too fast, but never mind. luxuriously cushioned with a mattress, pillows, and white linens, as well as the equally elegant table and the tiled floor. This one's correct now. Literally reading the image, one can hardly notice the encrypted 9-letter message embedded in the book placed on the table. It hardly reads like an open book. Divided into 2 lines on its verso side, the initial word from the Sabbath Kiddush is discernible, Veichulu. Inscribed on the recto page, the 4 last letters of the Hebrew alphabet hint at a piyut for Shabbat, Tikanta Shabbat, composed in reversed acrostication. As if playing a challenging game of charades with a beholder, the artist is thereby indicating that the Holocaust is celebrated on Shabbat afternoon, a fact that is well known from written sources. Next one, please. Throughout the manuscript, the artist accentuates the presence of boys. Here they are raising the crib in the Holocaust scene while pronouncing the infant's name. The rocking crib, a novelty owned by the high classes, is decorated by an apotropaic Magen David. To ward off the evil eye, the crib is also studded with small pellet bells, another well-known means to cast away the spell of demons, which is mentioned in the Babylonian Talmud and was later hushed and reinterpreted as the baby Mozart of its time, intended to pacify the infant and lull it into sleep. Can I have the next one, please? Thank you. As the research was reaching maturity, it was time to pay my Nuremberg Miscellany a 3rd visit before its publication. Closely re-examining it, suddenly I noticed a blurred image that had escaped me in the past. At the bottom left margin, appended to the benediction over bread, a bearded man is shown in profile, sitting in a green armchair, while his hands are holding a round bread. You'll have to believe me. The secondary text describes how, while pronouncing the blessing, one should place all 10 fingers on the loaf, before breaking it. To date, this is the only depiction I know of this iconographic theme. Next one, please. Thus, unsophisticated as they are in their execution, the images nonetheless exceed the boundaries of the interaction between text and image. Beyond relating to the main and secondary texts, the artist's para-images often connote an absent text, revealing his erudition and memory and commanding an equal degree of knowledge from his reader. A miniature hourglass painted beside the grace after meals is depicted beside the words of Alanissim, a prayer that the words Alanissim, actually, not the whole prayer, a prayer thanking God for his miracles and salvation, which is recited on Hanukkah and Purim. Note the size of the page. The hourglass thus serves as a reminder of the temporal additions to the permanent constituent of the liturgy. Next one, please. And that one we've already seen. Thank you, Richie, for showing it. Association and wit, sometimes even humor and visual linguistic puns, charmingly spice up the images. I think we need a click here. Thank you. In the initial word nodeh of the second benediction of the grace after meals, the letter on the right is shaped like spectacles. But why? We've heard that, but I'll repeat it again. In the secondary text, the scribe compiler expounds on how a person deemed worthy of reciting the grace is chosen. In a convoluted interpretation of the verse from Proverbs 22:9, he who has a good eye shall be blessed, the Talmud deduces that a good eye refers to a person of generous disposition who nonetheless is chosen not to be blessed, but rather to bless or recite the blessing. In a jocular way, the artist adds his exegetic layer, alluding verbatim to good eyesight, hence the spectacles in the initial word. Intricate and often elusive, the Nuremberg Miscellany is an amazing masterpiece of sophistication. It is at the same time a non-parade treasure that splendidly showcases Jewish life in southern Germany in the late 16th century, adding volumes as well as three-dimensional volume to our knowledge from literary sources. Mastering halacha, minhag, liturgy, midrash, and homilies, the compiler of the Miscellany was familiar with an immense array of texts. His encyclopedic dexterity enabled him to roam between them and sometimes quote from books that had just been released from the printing press. A vast library was probably accessible to him, or even more likely, shelved in his private home. A vast library was probably accessible to him, or even more likely, shelved in his private home, portraying a vivid bibliophile who furthermore had the means to procure it. With visual clues in the manuscript indicating a Swabian origin, as well as a memorial inscription, please the next one, that was added shortly after the manuscript was completed. Another click, please. And an 18th century ownership notation. All signs lead to the famous Ulmer Günzburg family, known for their philanthropy and erudition, whose wealth and influence reached way beyond Swabia. Three special friends have walked me down the aisle and deserve special recognition. Professor Elizabeth Hollander was the first to witness my love for the Nuremberg Miscellany. You never tired from discussing the text and illustrations with me, always there to advise. I cherish your help and critique, even if in one instance we disagree on the iconographic interpretation of a seemingly minute detail, but I know I was right. This book owes a lot to your kindness in giving, sagacity, and encouragement. Another dear friend, Dr. Andreas Lehnertz, became interested in my book as he is in so many other facets of Jewish culture and history. Busy as ever, he nonetheless volunteered to read the draft of the book. Sparing no effort, his painstaking comments include corrections of typos, historical observations, and suggested for further reading, along with the relevant PDFs. Thank you, Andreas, for sharing your scholarship. Thank you for your friendship. A fountain of knowledge, Rabbi Dr. Joseph Isaac Lifshitz, also known as Yitzchak, offered to read the entire manuscript as well. Mastering the Jewish bookcase, you made sure no Talmudic source, responsum, or midrash is missing from my interpretations of the text or images of the Miscellany, lending your expansive knowledge and insightful input to my avail. I greatly valued the shared moments of learning during our office hours at Tel Aviv University and on Egged buses traveling back to Jerusalem. The next one, please. So many of you present here tonight have accompanied me on this journey. The blessing of brilliant colleagues who are at the same time personal friends fueled my enthusiasm time and again. So many items in my bibliography have real faces behind them. This book would never have reached fruition without the professional touch of the De Gruyter publishing house, its editors, designers, and administrators. Please, next clip. Shunning no effort to help and improve, they offered impressive skills and created a masterpiece of design and good taste. I salute you for withstanding the 6 proofs, along with my back and forth email. My profound gratitude goes to you, Anne Hirschelmann, Dorothea Köhler, and Alice Meroz for everything. Next one, please. Next clip. My friends at the Goldstein-Goren Center have been a pleasure to meet whenever I came to the office. In our Melman library, Evelyn Offer and Sophia Tels-Abramov share their expertise in searching for and finding relevant material. Handling contacts with a publishing house, photo orders, and financial issues have been attentively and effectively dealt with by Ora Atzta, Sarah Appel, Adi Moskovich, Shimrit Haddad, and briefly also Roni Gamlieli. You were a great help. Jointly with Professor Goldin and Professor Stauber, you are the brain and the heart behind this unforgettable evening. Kudos. I'm profoundly indebted to the participants in tonight's program for honoring me and enriching us all with your learned contributions. I'm touched and grateful beyond words. Throughout all these years, my family has been by my side, offering love and encouragement. My dear sister, Dalia Karplus-Feuchtwanger, has mentored me with her clarity and thought and professional editorial skills, mastering the nuances of the English language and trying to improve mine. Her instruction has impacted my writing, although she still claims that the formulation of my sentences and their length are too German. I'll keep working on it. My son Yuval and my daughter Roni, my greatest source of joy and pride, have witnessed this study from its skeletal beginning to its fruition, always supportive and caring beyond measure. Special recognition goes to my husband and partner, Dr. Yaakov Sarig, aka Yankale. Sharing a study, you were there when I cried Eureka, or during moments of frustration upon facing a perplexing image. Thank you ever so much for all that you are. My parents, to whom I dedicated the book, are both no longer with us. Their instruction, inspiration, and blessing are the source of every word in it. With the publication of the book and its presentation tonight, the final words have yet to be said. Toda raba, danke schön, and thank you all very much for joining me in the celebration. Have a wonderful evening and a happy new year. Shana Tova.
Thank you, Naomi. Yeah, then we came indeed to the conclusion of this wonderful evening. I would like to thank the speakers, Richard Cohen, Yitzhak Lifshitz, and Andreas Lehnertz. And again, congratulate Naomi. And yes, as she said, have a wonderful evening and certainly a happy new year. And yes, you can certainly visually applaud Naomi on this achievement. Good night.